They're here to save the world again. Here's your look at the Diamond Select, the Real Ghostbusters Series 10 race stands. Dr. Raymond Stantz was performing psychological research at a large New York City university when his funding was unceremoniously cut, leaving him and his colleagues Egon Spangler and Peter Venkman out of work. However, a close encounter with a phantasm gave the trio the data they needed to catch and contain a supernatural entity, inspiring a new venture, the Ghostbusters. Ray purchased an empty firehouse for the group, and while business was slow at first, a localized spike in paranormal activity soon made them the toast of the town. Well versed in religious texts and the occult, Ray is also a technical wizard, designing the proton packs, neutrino wand, and ghost traps with Egon. He also does his own work on the Ghostbusters car, the Ecto-1. Ghostbuster fans, I will be resuming now my responsible duties of finishing off the rest of these Ghostbuster reviews. I know it seemed to take forever. So sorry, old bean. So sorry. We're going to go ahead and take the Ultra Measure 5000 nonetheless, and we're going to measure off Ray Stantz. I think it's pretty safe to assume that Ray Stantz is the exact same height as all the other Ghostbusters. Now, to be fair, though, some of the Ghostbusters obviously have higher hair than Ray. Not drawing too much attention to the fact that he's got less hair. But nonetheless, the figure's around 7 inches. Nonetheless, don't worry, I'll do some size comparisons in a second. How that translates to centimeters, yells somebody from the back of the audience. 18 centimeters, right there, 18 centimeters tall. That's what seems to have taken eons, or egons, okay, that's pretty bad, to complete. I've finally finished off, or will finish off, the Ghostbusters, at least the Ghostbusters, in this review. Then we're going to go ahead and have a look at the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. But in the meantime, here are the Ghostbusters that we've had a look at. All 4 of them. Wait a minute, there's all 3 of them. There's all 4 of them. Let's move Egon over a little bit. I still find these figures difficult at times to stand. I guess it's just the time of the day and the wind in the air to dictate whether these figures will stand or whether they will fall. I think when it comes time to eventually display these figures, I'm probably going to take the necessary means and precautions to get myself clear display stands, or really any sort of figure display stands, to get the figures all to stand, because I do find them, maybe, I don't know if it's the ankles or if it's the fact that they all have their proton packs on them, but I do find them difficult to stand. By the way, I know we also did some sizing of Ray Stantz. So again, how does he stack up with the other Ghostbusters? He is the shortest. The shoulders, as you will see, are all the same, being that these are all the same molds to one another. Where their heights will drop or increase is simply just by the size of their heads. Egon would be safe to say he's the tallest of the quartet, followed closely after that to Peter Venkman here on the far right. And now for Ray's accessories, unfortunately I have to report the fact that we're not really exploring any new territory here. All the accessories that he comes included with are pretty much identical, verbatim, to the other accessories that came included with the other Ghostbusters. So there's not really a whole lot that we can say. I can't really add any more details to stuff of which we've already looked at. But let's say you're new to this channel, and let's say this is the first video that you're watching of this channel. Thank you, by the way, for doing that. I do not want to simply just rush through the accessories, so even though we have already looked at these before, some time, at least camera time is required just to show you guys. He does come with a PKE meter, and the PKE meter looks identical to all the other ones, although I think from what I remember, Egon's actually had the antennas up. The other ones are pretty much identical to one another though. Nice little readout display, a few little knobs there on the side, none of which can actually rotate. Like an overall good representation of the way it looks in the cartoon. By the way, I also love, as I've already stated in several of these videos, the purple coloring that they've incorporated into all their ghost busting gear. Again, trademarked colors that they would have had in the show. So again, nice little PK meter. Nothing really new there, nothing really new to report there. He does also have, speaking of nothing new to report, also includes the ghost trap. The ghost trap, again, almost dropped that. The Ghostbuster trap also shares the same purple color scheme. The very familiar Hazard alternating yellow and black is featured there on the front, where the door will open up, and then on the side you've got some silver, basically again all of which it looks like it does in the show. You've also got a little foot pedal. We'll talk about that in a second. Remind me if you can. He does also come with the proton stream that's going to attach to the neutrino wand, or the ghost, or the proton wand. I'll show you guys that in a second. And nothing really interesting here, just the gloved hands. Any one of the Ghostbusters that you picked up, whether it be the real Ghostbusters line, or the movie tie-in lines, will have pretty much the exact same hands. Nothing's different at all between these ones and the movie counterparts. Same as nothing is different really between these hands and the other real Ghostbuster figures that we've already had a look at. I know you're also asking yourself, where is the firehouse piece that also comes included with Ray? I know I almost forgot about it with Peter Venkman's review, and rest assured I will not make that same mistake. No reviewer, bad reviewer. I'm not going to do that, but we will have a look at that at the end of this video. I want to just kind of talk about the component pieces for that basically when it's all said and done, we've already had a look at the figure. So that being said, a few little things I want to talk about at least from the accessory standpoint. There's the proton pack there on his back, the neutrino wand, or the proton wand, which, as you can see, attaches. There is this little hook place here, and it can attach actually in a couple of places. I most definitely attach it there, but I've also seen some people kind of wedge it underneath there as well. It does kind of make the wand a little higher up. So I think, honestly, the best place to put it is I think nature would have intended it, to have it actually sitting right there, attaching to the side. Mileage may vary as to how well that stays in place. Often I find myself revisiting because it wants to leave home and go off and explore the world, and I have to remind it, no, you have to stay home right now. You're a young proton pack and a very young proton wand. It's not time to leave home just yet. I find it still funny and perplexing that getting these out of the packaging, they always seem to have an already creased line right there. I don't know if that is, well, it is the case with all the Ghostbusters. It kind of misleadingly convinces you that there's a stress line already developing on it, but I think it's just taken from the mold, because they're all the exact same way. It does look broken, doesn't it? Especially on this side here. I can assure you it's not broken. That's just the way it came out of the packaging. But again, a nice looking proton pack, a nice good looking proton wand. One thing I did want to introduce to this part of this review is the placement of the ghost trap. Normally in the movies it would be down here, right? Yeah. Here though, for the real Ghostbusters, it actually attaches to the top. And I've already said this on the other 3 reviews, but getting it in place, it seems like it sits on an angle because of how far down that peg is. And I granted understand that if you removed it, you wouldn't want the peg to stick out way here. But unfortunately, just the way it's placed, it's actually even in your better interest to not fully push it down, where it has to then sit on an angle. If you put it in just a little bit, it stays flush to the proton pack, really where you want it. There's also this little hook right here as well, which I kind of had the idea initially that if the ghost trap has this little foot pedal, and I thought to myself, I wonder if I could actually take the pedal and attach the cording to that clip. Now this is something you may want to probably do first before you attach the actual trap itself. If you just move the arm out of the way, there is, like I said, there's that little ledge. Well, you can take the trap pedal, and it doesn't sit tightly, mind you, but at least it stays out of the way until, of course, you drop the ghost trap. Hold on one second. And the floor has claimed one casualty for this review. Let's hope that's the last. I have reclaimed it, and actually in that amount of time I decided actually to abandon what I initially was going to say and instead flip the trap around so the handle is actually down here. This is a little bit closer to what I was talking about, even though I had the trap flipped the opposite way around initially. You can see how it drapes its way around that little hook. Not well, but enough that it looks like it's intended to be the case. And that's basically how all this stuff attaches to the proton pack. After all that's being said and done, I'm only going to simply take the trap off. And I'm going to put it to the side. I'm going to move all his other accessories to the side as well. And we'll have a look at Ray's Stantz. Now, I will admit, when we had a look at all the figures initially at toy shows and toy conventions, and they were showcasing how the Ghostbusters were going to look, the one snafu, stumbling point, if you will, was of all the characters, Ray's Stantz. And I didn't think the head sculpt looked all that great. Now, I understand that this is supposed to be, of course, a cartoon-inspired line, but still there is that little fragment of wanting to add a modern spin to it. Make them a little bit more realistic and, of course, get much more mileage out of their existing molds that they've already been using for all the movie figures. So, of course, we have to kind of change the figures a little bit. They still get your cartoon vibe out there, but it still is a little bit different than them looking exact carbon copies the way they look in the show. Good examples of that are characters like, I'm going to bring him in, Egon. I think or Winston, I should say. Winston is a good example of that. I think Winston looks like he does from the show, but it kind of gives you a modern spin to it. My favorite still of the bunch is Peter Venkman. And I think Peter Venkman, once again, doesn't quite look like the show, but you get enough of Venkman in the figure that it feels like it's a happy medium. There's something, though, about jarring when it comes to Ray, though. There, go put the proton wand back on. There's something jarring about Ray, and I'm trying to pinpoint what exactly it is. And I think what a lot of the problem is the proportions of the figure. They, of course, want to make use of the same mold. I get that. They've colored it correctly to the way the figure and to the way he looks in the show, because, of course, all their jumpers would have unique colors to their characters, unlike one suit color that would have been in the movie. The thing is, though, about it is Ray is, from what I understand and what I remember, Ray is shorter than the other Ghostbusters. Proportionately, maybe his head would have worked if simply his body was a little shorter. I think by giving him the exact same length of body as, well, even like Peter Venkman. Peter Venkman's head works well for the rest of his body because his head is a fairly long head. There's something about Ray that makes it does seem like his head is too small for the rest of his body. I have to tell myself, well, I don't think it's so much that his head, this width-wise, I don't think is necessarily the culprit, but it is probably the length of head that's actually giving me the illusion that the figure's proportions for his head aren't the same as the rest of his body. It does really feel like this figure should have been shorter, not only because he was shorter in the show, but also because if they wanted to make use of this same mold for this head, I really think that the problem comes with that. Give the proton wand back in place. I think the problem with that is this head, whether I feel good or bad about the head, I don't think it's the right size for the rest of his body. And whether it is the case of it's just proportionally, it's a little bit smaller, it's just shrunk down or squished down a little bit. It does look wrong to the rest of his body. Now, that being said, I mean, the face itself is somewhat a happy marriage between the cartoon and a realistic spin to the Ghostbusters. And yet still there's something off-putting about his face. I don't know if it's necessarily the smile. I think it's really, again, the fact that it just doesn't work for this particular body. Like, the paint is generally pretty good. I'm happy the fact that they gave him at least somewhat of an expression to his face. It kind of actually reminds me of the old man from Christmas Story, of all things. I mean, his hair is fairly accurate to the cartoon, the way they've given it slightly more orangey red top here, and his eyebrows also match that as well, but I don't know. It's not my favorite of all the Ghostbuster figures. It might even very well be my least favorite. As for the rest of the body, there's not really too much to report. I mean, it's pretty much the exact same body as the rest of the figures, but where the departure comes is the fact that the coloring is different, and I like that. I like kind of one of the things I liked about the cartoon was that their outfits weren't all the same. If you saw the pilot intro, something that wasn't eventually used, all the Ghostbusters, I think, had this color of jumper, and eventually they changed and migrated that out to various different costumes, different colors specific to the Ghostbusters, and I always thought that worked a little bit better. Again, there's not really too much different with Ray, so I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about the outfit, because, again, if you've seen any one of my movie reviews of the Ghostbuster toys, or the real Ghostbuster toys, all of them will have the exact same suits. A slightly rubberized elbow pads, the ghost emblem there, only on the one side of his arm, the other one doesn't have that. And this one also doesn't have, which is, I don't even know, something I mentioned in the other Ghostbuster reviews, their name patches are completely omitted. They just left them off altogether. The belt, like I said, there's not too much different there, and even the feet. Now this is actually one example as well, even with Peter. We'll put Ray down here for a second. Peter, based on his cartoon design, was also the only instance in which you actually had a Peter Venkman that tucked his pant legs into his boots. Also, one thing to mention as well, comparing the two side by side, you'll see that the coloring of the bands will be different. So not only are the costumes different in color, but also the bands on their sleeves and the bands just before the boots start touching the pant leg. Those are also a different color as well. Other than that, though, I mean, same exact body, same exact proton pack, same exact problem attaching the neutrino wand, unfortunately, to the side there. I can't really think of how else they could have done it. Maybe a peg. I mean, certainly they could have put a hook there, which they really have done anyways. If they had hooked this on, and I don't even know, added like a little peg point here where you could attach this to the side, it would guarantee that the wand wouldn't go anywhere. Unfortunately, it's just really the hook that's keeping everything in place. And as you probably already see frequently in this review already, the hook is just not nearly enough. It's not strong enough to keep the neutrino wand in place. So let's have a look at this guy's articulation. It would be the exact same on all the other Ghostbusters. So the head rotates all the way around. It hinges slightly up, more so down. And it also rocks back and forth. Kind of a different way, a different take to display the figure. The arms hinge out. That's on both sides. I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it because I know if I put it back, it's going to fall off again. Take that, proton wand. The arms rotate all the way around. He has a hinge in the elbow, which also allows that forearm to rotate all the way around. You may find that the elbow pad wants to hitch on board and go along for the ride. Just let it. Just bring joy to an otherwise joyless life that elbow pad has. That's awfully sad. Hand rotates all the way around. Sorry for the sad story about the elbow pad. Hand hinges back and forth. You have the upper torso ball joint. A little restricted, kind of the way that everything is attached into place. The legs split. There is a mid-thigh cut that allows the legs to swivel all the way around. Double hinge on the knee. And then again on the feet. Now the feet hinge up and down. They rock back and forth. But there's something to be said about these Ghostbuster figures, whether it be the movie figures or whether it be the real Ghostbuster figures. I always have a tough time getting these guys to stand. And I think I'm just going to call it quits, throw in the proverbial towel, and I think I'm going to probably just end up using display stands. Just again, like I find the stance on Ray stands to be probably the same problems that I have with all the other real Ghostbusters. Speaking of the other real Ghostbusters, once again, for wrapping up this review, we'll bring in all the real Ghostbusters that we've had a look at so far on this channel. The first one being Egon. Get that all in place. Get that in place. Still a problem with the proton wands. Get that in place. There goes Ray. I knew it would eventually one of the figures would topple over. So sad that unfortunately happens to be the figure that we're having a look at right there. And there goes Peter. We were starting so well in this review, and now all these figures are just toppling over. So we will get them back in place. The reasoning why I'm also bringing them back into place for the end of this review, for just before we get to final looks, is I also wanted to talk a little bit about what my favorite figures were from this wave. And unfortunately, it seems as if they're going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt to get them all to eventually stand. I'm going to persevere. I'm going to keep going, keep moving forward. Because certainly, gosh darn it, the Ghostbusters would keep pushing forward. If anything was in front of them for a problem, you know they'd fix it. There's the Ghostbusters. And eventually, whoosh, they're all standing, at least for the time being. I'll quickly wrap this up before they fall over. What I was going to say, though, is now that I've looked at all 4 Ghostbusters, I feel so compelled to move. There we go. Stay, please, everybody stay. Everybody stay? Everybody good? Okay, everybody's good. The reason also why I wanted to bring these guys all in for just before final looks is so you guys can see the difference between all the 4 figures. Again, the bodies are exactly the same. The colors are a little bit different. Of course, the heads are also the one big change with all the we've looked at. Collectively looking at them, I think my favorite by far is Venkman, followed actually by Zedmore. I think Winston is not my favorite. He's not as good as Peter, my own honest opinion, but I think he's actually a resounding yes for second favorite. You know, of all things, the more I'm looking at all the 4 figures now, Ray actually, though he does have, don't get me wrong, something off about his face, at least the size of his head, he might actually have a better sculpt than Egon. I don't know if it's just the glasses that's killing me for Egon, but there you go. There's your 4 figures, my favorite being Venkman. Let me know down below of the 4 figures whether you had these in your collection, picked them up successfully, or really just living vicariously through these reviews. What order would you put the sculpts on the Ghostbusters? Which is your least favorite to your top favorite, vice versa? What is your top favorite to least favorite? Love reading your comments down below. Now, before we get to final looks, I also didn't forget, I also wanted to guys show you the build-up piece that came included with Ray Stantz. The reason why I did want to keep this actually as a separate part of the review is because, lo and behold, actually, the more and more I'm looking around the section in which I review these figures, I kind of keep a lot of the accessories and stuff separately, eventually moving them over to totes. And whereas I had failed miserably doing the rooftop diorama of Diamond Select and chalking it really up to the fact I just simply didn't have size to build it, so therefore I kind of dismissed the idea of even wanting to really pick up all the smaller individual pieces. I think actually the more and more I look around, I think I might actually have, so far, everything that has been released. Part of the fire hall set that I could actually outright build the fire halls. So I may potentially consider doing this, just an FYI, as maybe something I may do in a future video. If I can find all the pieces that I've got so far, don't mark it down, don't commit me to this, but I may actually see if I can put together what I've got so far, and I may actually even surprise myself to find that I have everything I need so far, thus far, to build myself the fire hall. Whether I'll actually use it as a legitimate display simply because of how much space it's going to ask for, still nonetheless I might actually even try doing that. It's good to have a little pet project, little hobby you can do on the side when you're not doing, of course, reviewing and living an adult real world life. By the way, again, I just wanted to show you, this is the piece that came included with Ray. Now you would have to imagine that the corners of the firehouse would be on either side. The door would be down here. And then this would be the section that would have the actual ghost symbol. If that makes sense? That makes sense. Really nice paintwork done to it. It's a little bit heavier, of course, because there's some extra plastic that they've afforded there for the front. Again, this will sit above the doors. Gosh darn it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to see if I can put together the firehouse. And if I do, I'll maybe save that for a separate review. So you guys can stay tuned for that. Now, you can bet your bottom dollar before this reviewer puts his collection of real Ghostbuster figures out on display, he's going to grab some much-needed display stands to prevent any of the falling that you see or had saw during this review. I don't know if you can chalk it up to the fact that they're all wearing proton packs causing the top heaviness of this, but there's something about these feet that just cause these figures to topple over way too frequently. Either they fall forward or they fall back, but either way, they don't stand straight. Probably going to get myself some display stands and fix that problem post-haste. In the meantime, though, having a look at Ray here in final looks, still a not bad release from the folks over at Diamond Select. Still, though, there's something about Ray's head. I know I've already said it on ad nausea in this review, but it almost seems like he's got a small boy head with a man-sized body. I guess they probably could have made the head a little bit bigger or a little bit longer. That probably could have fixed the problem outright. It's not a bad head sculpt, but again, there's something about its size that's throwing me off. Am I crazy? Is this reviewer have no idea what he's talking about? Let me know down below. We can have a discussion and have some fun. In the meantime, if you guys are interested in picking these ones up for yourself, despite for the fact that it took me so gosh darn it long to actually get through these reviews, you can still actually find these real Ghostbuster figures at your local comic book store. So if you are interested in picking these ones up for yourself, don't go the route of going online to buy them. Check your local comic book store first and foremost, because you might actually surprise yourself and surprise the store owner, who probably wasn't expecting any customers that day, to actually find these at your local comic book store. By the way, if you are looking for your local comic book store in your area, here comes the plug. www.comicshoplocator.com. No, I don't get sponsored by comicshoplocator.com. Put that information in, your zip code, your postal code, bingo, bango. You can find a comic book store in your area. You're very welcome. Yeah, it's the least I could do. Also, if you are new to this channel and digging this guy's contents, you can also hit that little subscribe button down below. Do yourself also a favor of turning on that bell notification. And why don't you do this guy a favor and also hitting that like button down below if you thought this review was helpful, handy, and otherwise pretty cozy. I like to produce somewhat cozy content. Speaking of cozy content, my friends of the mob, rest assured some more future cozy content will be coming soon to this channel. I promise I won't call it cozy content, unless you guys like cozy content. Thanks for watching as you always do, guys. And hey, now let me know down below what you guys think of the Ray Stantz from the folks over at Diamond Select. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do, and I'll see you guys next time.